Esther Rolle was a woman of strength, dignity, and fierce independence. But behind that calm, wise face was a fire lit by betrayal, disrespect, and broken trust in Hollywood. At 78, she finally spoke her truth. Not many know this, but Esther held deep resentment towards some of her co-stars and industry peers, the ones who made her feel invisible, the ones who tried to silence her voice. Today, we reveal the 6 actors Esther Rolle hated the most, and trust us, it will leave you stunned. The truth is raw, the pain is real. Let's uncover the drama. Esther Rolle was born in 1920 in Pompano Beach, Florida, into a family of 18 children. Life wasn't easy. Raised in a strict Bahamian home, Esther had to fight for every inch of her freedom, but her passion for acting kept her going. She rose to fame in the 1970s as Florida Evans in Good Times, becoming one of the most beloved black actresses on American television. But fame did not come without pain. She often clashed with producers and actors who wanted to shape her character into a stereotype she didn't believe in. Esther fought for integrity, truth, and representation, but Hollywood didn't always reward that. Her outspokenness led to tension, especially when she stood up against the mistreatment of black women on screen. She was bold, unapologetic, and that ruffled many feathers. She left Good Times at the height of its popularity due to behind-the-scenes disagreements. She was heartbroken, not because of the fame she left behind, but because of the disrespect she endured. Her journey was one of resistance, a battle to be heard in a world that often tried to silence women like her. Despite the smiles on screen, Esther carried deep wounds caused by those she trusted the most, and some of those people were fellow actors. Number 1. Jimmy Walker. Jimmy Walker played Esther Rolle's on-screen son, J.J. Evans, in Go. Odd times, but behind the camera, their relationship was filled with tension, disappointment, and hurt. What began as a promising family-centered sitcom quickly turned sour when Jimmy's over-the-top comedic antics took center stage. Esther felt the soul of the show was stolen, turned into a circus of catchphrases and cheap laughs. Esther Rolle had joined Good Times with a mission to show a strong, respectful black family on television. A mother, a father, and their children facing real struggles with dignity. But as the ratings soared, producers began shifting the spotlight onto Jimmy Walker's character, JJ, who became more exaggerated, more clownish with every episode. The phrase "Dynamite" echoed across America, but for Esther, it was the sound of her vision crumbling. She publicly criticized the show's direction, saying it was making a mockery of black families. She called out Jimmy Walker by name, accusing him of playing into harmful stereotypes. But Jimmy? He did not back down. In interviews, he dismissed her concerns and painted her as difficult to work with. He even stated that they never spoke on set unless the script required it. Esther saw this as betrayal, not just of her, but of everything they were supposed to stand for. She believed Jimmy had chosen fame over responsibility, laughs over truth. Their conflict became so deep that Esther eventually left the show entirely in protest. Years later, when asked about Good Times, Esther did not hide her pain. "He was a clown," she once said of Walker, and that clown ruined what could have been something powerful. The love was gone, the respect shattered. And in her final years, Jimmy Walker remained one of the few names Esther could never forgive. A son on screen, an enemy in real life. Number 2, Jon Amos. Jon Amos and Esther Rolle shared something rare on screen, a bond that felt real. As James and Florida Pueton, A. Evans on Good Times, they were the heart of the show, strong, united, proud. But behind the scenes, their relationship was far more complicated, and eventually it shattered in ways Esther never fully healed from. In the early seasons, Esther admired Jon. He was serious, grounded, and shared her passion for portraying a strong black family. Together, they fought against scripts they felt were disrespectful or inaccurate. They were allies in a war against Hollywood's stereotypes. But that alliance slowly started to unravel. Jon Amos became increasingly frustrated with the producers. Like Esther, he was angry about the direction the show was taking, especially the focus on JJ's comedic character. But instead of standing firmly beside Esther, he became combative, clashing with producers in ways that caused even more tension. Eventually, Jon was fired from Good Times after the 3rd season. On the surface, it seemed like Esther would support him, but deep down, she felt abandoned. In private, Esther revealed she believed Jon had gone too far, that instead of working together, he had made it all about himself. She felt he let his ego cloud his judgment, and that his exit made her fight harder and lonelier. While she stayed to protect the show's purpose, he walked away, leaving her to carry the weight. When they reunited years later, their chemistry was gone. The warmth faded. Esther had grown cold toward Jon. She once said in an interview, "He left, and I was left to pick up the pieces." That is not what a real man does. Not to a woman who fought beside him. To viewers, they were the perfect TV couple. But to Esther, Jon became another man who said all the right things, until it got hard. Number 3. Ralph Carter. Ralph Carter, who played Michael Evans' Florida youngest son on Good Times, was once someone Esther Rolle saw as a bright, promising young man. She treated him like family, often offering guidance and protecting him from the harsh realities of show business. But over time, Ralph's silence and indifference would leave Esther deeply wounded. Esther saw Ralph as the conscience of the show. His character stood for justice, education, and progress. She had high hopes for him, not just as an actor, but as a voice for change. But when tensions behind the scenes grew and the show shifted into a more comedic tone, Ralph didn't speak up. He stayed quiet. And that silence, for Esther, felt like betrayal. As she fought publicly against the producers and against Jimmy Walker's rising dominance on the show, Ralph never took a side. He never defended her when the media labeled her difficult or when producers tried to diminish her role. She expected solidarity, but got silence. What hurt Esther the most was the way Ralph slowly distanced himself, not just from her, but from the entire message they once stood for. Even as she continued to mentor and fight for the integrity of the show, Ralph remained passive. And when she eventually left Good Times, Ralph did not reach out. No letter, no call, no words. Years later, Esther was asked in an interview if she kept in touch with Ralph. She simply replied, "No. Some people outgrow you. Some people just disappear." Her tone was not angry, but it was heavy, filled with disappointment. To the world, he was her son. But in the real world, he became a reminder that loyalty in Hollywood often fades with fame. Esther never hated Ralph for what he did, but for what he failed to do. And in her eyes, that silence hurt more than any insult ever could. Number 4. Bernardet Stannis. Bernardet Stannis played Thelma Evans, Florida's only daughter in Good Times. On screen, the bond between Thelma and Florida was beautiful, nurturing, and powerful. But off-screen, things began to change in ways Esther Rolle never expected. What began as a mother-daughter dynamic turned into distance, disappointment, and unspoken hurt. In the early days, Esther embraced Bernardet, not like her own. She gave her advice, encouraged her to stay grounded, and taught her how to move with dignity in an industry that could chew up young women and spit them out. But as the show grew more popular, Bernardet began to shine in her own light. Fans loved her, magazines featured her. She was young, beautiful, and becoming a star. With that fame came ego. At least, that's how Esther saw it. She began to feel that Bernardet was changing, becoming more focused on herself, on image, on being adored by Hollywood. Esther noticed how Bernardet stopped seeking her advice, started questioning her opinions, and at times, sided with producers instead of supporting her. Esther wasn't just hurt, she was heartbroken. She had loved her like a daughter, but now she felt like just another aging co-star being pushed aside. She once told a close friend, she forgot who stood by her. She forgot who kept her safe in the beginning. When Esther left Good Times, there was no strong public support from Bernardet, no emotional tribute, nothing. And that silence became louder than any words. In later interviews, Esther spoke gently about Bernardet, but with clear pain in her eyes. She never publicly slammed her, but it was clear the bond had broken. Esther didn't hate Bernardet for succeeding. She hated the way fame pulled her away, the way gratitude vanished. In her heart, she had lost a daughter, not to death, but to distance. Number 5. Janette Dozier. Janette Dozier, who played the sassy and spirited Willona Woods on Good Times, was once one of Esther Rolle's closest allies. They were two powerful black women in a white-dominated industry, fighting to bring truth and dignity to the screen. Their chemistry was electric, their presence unshakable. But what the cameras never showed was the silent rivalry simmering beneath the surface, a rivalry that would one day destroy their sisterhood. In the beginning, Esther admired Janette's confidence and boldness. She appreciated having another strong woman on set who was not afraid to speak her mind. They often supported each other during script disputes and behind-the-scenes conflicts. But as Wilona's character grew more popular, things started to change. Producers began giving Janette more scenes, more jokes, and more glamour. Slowly, she was becoming the fun face of the show, while Esther's more serious maternal character faded into the background. Esther felt blindsided. She believed Janette should have spoken up, should have said, "This show is about Florida Evans, do not sideline her." But Janette said nothing. She accepted the spotlight, embraced the laughs, and moved forward. To Esther, it felt like betrayal by someone she called a sister. Their off-screen relationship grew icy. Conversations became brief, smiles became forced, and the warmth that once existed vanished. Esther believed Janette had allowed her ambition to outweigh her loyalty. She even felt that Janette played both sides, befriending producers while pretending to support Esther's fight for authentic representation. Years later, when asked about Janette, Esther simply said, "Some women survive by stepping over others. I never learned how to do that." It was a cold, sharp truth. The pain lingered, not because of open arguments, but because of what was left unspoken. In Esther's eyes, she lost not just a colleague, but a sister who forgot how they started together. Number 6. Larry Wilmore. Larry Wilmore, a talented comedian and writer, never shared the screen with Esther Rolle. He came years later as a modern voice in television and satire, but what he said and what he refused to say left Esther feeling erased and disrespected in the final chapter of her life. As television evolved, people like Larry Wilmore began reshaping Black narratives for a new generation. He was bold, witty, and highly respected. But during interviews and public discussions about Black sitcoms and cultural impact, he often praised shows like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Martin, and The Cosby Show, while glossing over or ignoring the foundational work done by shows like Good Times and Esther's trailblazing performance. To Esther, that silence was louder than any insult. She saw it as a calculated dismissal of everything she had fought for. She had opened the door, sacrificed her comfort, endured public criticism, all to give authenticity to the image of Black families on screen. And yet, her name rarely made the lists. Her struggle was not celebrated, and in Larry's rising commentary, she was just a footnote, if mentioned at all. What stung even more was when Larry made light of the seriousness of shows like Good Times, calling them heavy-handed or dated. To Esther, those words erased the blood, sweat, and soul she poured into every episode. Her work wasn't perfect, but it mattered. In one of her final interviews, Esther spoke with sadness in her voice. "They laugh now, but forget who stood in the storm. We weren't trying to be stars, we were trying to survive." She didn't know Larry personally, but she felt his disregard. And in her quiet moments, she admitted that this new generation had not just moved on, they had turned their backs. For Esther, Larry Wilmore became the face of a Hollywood that forgets too easily and thanks too little. Esther Rolle was more than just a TV mother. She was a force, a pioneer, and a woman who stood when others stayed silent. She gave her heart to her work, her soul to her community, and her voice to a generation that needed strength. But behind the applause, behind the awards, lived a woman who was deeply wounded by the very people she once called family. These 6 names were not just co-workers, they were part of her journey. A journey filled with hopes, betrayal, loyalty, and silence. Each one, in their own way, chipped away at her trust. Not with loud betrayals, but with indifference, ego, and abandonment. And for Esther, that hurt far more than any public insult. It was the quiet rejection, the absence when she needed support, the silence when she screamed for truth. Yet through it all, Esther never stopped standing for what she believed in. Even in the face of fading fame and forgotten credit, she held her ground. She was never afraid to speak out, even if it meant standing alone. Because to Esther Rolle, dignity mattered more than applause. Truth mattered more than popularity. In the end, her legacy is not defined by who she hated, but by how fiercely she loved the people she portrayed. She loved her community. She loved her truth. And despite the pain, she never let Hollywood dim her light. Esther Rolle walked through the fire and still stood tall.